Good evening, everyone. It is once again Ted the Speed Learner. Has anyone noticed that music doesn't sound as good as it did roughly 75 years ago, or 50 years ago, or 40 years ago, and in some cases even 30 years ago? There's a list of reasons for this. And in this particular video, I will not only go over this list, but I will help you remember this list. Why is that? That way, if anyone says to you that music is subjective and that all music is good, you can have a proper response for them. Okay? Now, so who discovered the sudden change in music? It was discovered by the Spanish National Research Council. This particular organization can be found in Madrid, Spain. Now, how are you going to remember that? Just imagine in your head a mariachi band wearing funeral clothes. Now, that's a sight to be seen, I can tell you that. You talk about a morbid sight, there you go. Then imagine that this mariachi band is conducting chemistry experiments in a cemetery. They would be most bold researchers. They would be the most bold researchers that you will ever meet. So where can you find this particular research paper on music that was written by the Spanish National Research Council? Well, I've got a hyperlink right down here where you can look at this and you can follow along with this video. Go ahead and read the whole paper. I can wait. Okay, now that you've taken the time to read this, let's go on. Prior to the beginning of the year 2000, you could find pitch transitions in many popular songs. But what is a pitch transition? Sound pitches are determined by the rate of sound vibrations. Sound vibrations are measured in hertz. And you can research all this stuff for yourself. So if you want to remember what I've said so far, just imagine a baseball pitcher sitting in a hearse. And for those of you who do not know what a hearse is, that's the car that they would use. They put a casket in it and they would transport a casket to the cemetery. Okay, that's what a hearse is. You can look that up for yourself. Okay, so I'm going to go over this again. Sound vibrations are measured in hertz. Okay, and we're just using the baseball pitcher in the hearse so that you guys can remember that. Alright. So what produces higher pitches and lower pitches? It's the amount of hertz that a sound has that produces the higher pitches. Okay? The more hertz a sound has, the greater the pitch of the sound. So imagine that the baseball pitcher climbs out of the hearse and starts running. The faster he runs, the higher the pitch. Okay? Now then, have you ever noticed that in songs recorded after the year 2000, you are having a hard time finding pitch transitions? Okay? This would be like a sudden transition from a low pitch to a high pitch, that kind of thing. That's because musicians rarely use pitch transitions in their songs anymore. It's hard to find. It's not impossible, but it's very hard to find. This is what makes many songs in the 21st century sound so bland. But it gets worse. Let's focus on another musical term. This term is known as timbre, but it's spelled T-I-M-B-R-E. Let's say that again. T-I-M-B-R-E. But it's pronounced timbre. So let's imagine that a lumberjack is playing a guitar. Alright? So what is timbre? Different musical instruments produce different sound waves. If you play a C note on a guitar, it's going to sound differently than when you play the same C note on a piano. That way you can distinguish a guitar from a piano. And this is the same way with a trumpet or with a violin, that kind of thing. Alright? So, how are you going to remember that? Well, let's imagine that the lumberjack has stopped playing the guitar and he's playing a piano now. Or maybe he's playing a flute. Or maybe he's playing a violin, whatever. Okay? And he's just switching from one instrument to the next. And that's how you got to remember that. So can you find a wide range of timbre in modern day songs? Not usually. And why is that? Because most songs today are produced with a synthesizer, possibly an electric guitar, a drum machine, so you don't even have drums anymore, and on top of that, computer software. So how can you distinguish one instrument from the next if there's hardly any instruments in the song to begin with? Well, you can't. It's that simple. Okay? Now, if you listen to a song that was produced in the 70s, even the 60s, possibly even the 50s, and even to some extent in the 80s, I didn't really notice the big shift until about 1985. If you'll go back prior to 1985 and you listen to some of those songs, you're going to be able to distinguish guitars and flutes and saxophones and whatnot. You really can't do that anymore. Now, even if a modern day band decides to incorporate lots of instruments in their song, can you distinguish between the instruments? Well, to some degree you can, but here's the problem. When people mix music together, what they do nowadays, it didn't happen years ago. Sometimes you would hear a guitar in the foreground and maybe a trumpet in the background, or possibly a synthesizer in the background, or even a piano in the background, and they would just kind of shift it back and forth. And this is where you got piano solos and guitar solos, that kind of thing. They don't do that anymore. Oh no. Every instrument is, the volume of those instruments is shifted to the same level. So the sound of the guitar is at the same sound level as the sound of the piano or the synthesizer or the drum machine. You can no longer distinguish. You can't say, well, I hear this in the foreground and this in the background. There is no foreground and background anymore because they're at the same volume. Quite literally. And they're doing this deliberately. Okay? This is something you didn't know. Alright. So, there are no musical instruments in the background anymore. That's because the volume of each instrument has been turned up. It's been done deliberately. And have you noticed that newer songs are louder than older songs? Well, this is being done deliberately too. Why is that? Because they want you to hear their song over somebody else's. And now you can distinguish one song from the other because, well, song A is not as loud as song B. And if song C comes out, okay, let's say we have a song C and it starts to come out, it's going to be even louder than song B, so you'll want to listen to it over song B. And they do this all the time. Now let's focus on musical chords. What is a musical chord? Well, a musical chord is when three notes are played together. Prior to the year 2000, most songs used a wide variety of chords. Is that the case today? Not hardly. Many popular songs in the 21st century use the same four chords. I'm not kidding you. They may not be in the same order, but these are the four chords, and these are the only four chords you're going to find in these songs. Okay? These chords are A minor, F, C, and G. Okay. You want proof of this? Well, I got a YouTube video. I'm going to leave a hyperlink to that particular video right down here in the description below. You can go watch it for yourself, and you're going to see how many songs are like this. In 2017, most, not all, but most of the most popular songs at that in the year 2017 were comprised of these four, and only these four chords. They sound familiar, that's why you like them. They found out the four chords that almost everybody likes, and they did it. So how will you remember the word chord? Well, just look at any power chord you have in the house, or just imagine that you have a guitar and there's a chord attached to it. Okay? Now, how will you remember the four chords I mentioned? Just imagine that there's a student. He's a straight A student. Suddenly he takes a test and he gets an F on it. So he has to chug a lot of herbal tea to relax from the shock of suddenly getting an F. And if you say, well, what kind of a student was he? He was a music student. That's what he was. He's a music student. He's been making straight A's. Now he's made an F, so he has to chug. And you notice the C and the G on the word chug? He has to chug herbal tea to relax. Okay? Now then, the last topic I will cover in this particular video is lyrics from many songs. At the beginning of the Revolutionary War, Francis Scott Key wrote a poem. Later that poem was set to music and became our national anthem. Are poems being set to music today? Not very often. You ought to take a look at the lyrics of some of these songs these days. It's unbelievable, and it's sad. So, are we setting poems to music now? Most of the time, no, we aren't. And that's regrettable. So, is music in some ways subjective? Well, in some ways it is. It depends on whether you can actually relate to what is being discussed in the song or not. Now, I'll give you a perfect illustration of this. Rick James wrote a song called Super Freak. Okay? Well, I don't know that he actually wrote it. I'll have to do some more research on that, but he actually sung it. Okay? You can see Rick James in the video. He sung the song Super Freak. He may have not actually wrote the lyrics. I'll have to check to see who wrote them. So, let me have some time. I'll try to leave that in the description below or whatever. But anyway, he sung a song called Super Freak. Okay? Now, unless you live a rock and roll lifestyle, or you aspire to live a rock and roll lifestyle, you're going to have a tough time relating to this song. Not to mention the fact that I hate to say it, but it has some pretty bad moral values. It really does. But why would I even want to listen to it? Well, that's because there was some kind of a deal struck up between Rick James and MC Hammer, and I will cover that in a future video, but somehow a deal was struck between Rick James and MC Hammer. And when that happened, MC Hammer, he produced a song called You Can't Touch This. If you'll compare that to Super Freak, you'll find out that the basic music of Super Freak was used in You Can't Touch This. I was appalled at this. I'm not sure what the exact deal was. I don't know how that ever happened, but really, Super Freak should have been left alone. It would have actually gone off in obscurity if that had not happened. But it didn't. And that's why I cannot relate to You Can't Touch This, because I remember Super Freak. And this is a similar type of situation that happened, and I don't know the exact details of this either, and I'm sure you guys are going to look this up, but Sergio Mendes sang a song called Alibis. And if you'll compare the music of Alibis to Kenny Rogers' islands in the stream, you'll find them to be remarkably similar. That's because a deal was struck. What that deal was, I'll have to research that. I'll have to look that up. I have not had a chance to do that yet, but there you go. But this is what goes on all the time. As a matter of fact, nowadays, people are taking songs from the 60s and the 70s and redoing them. And not always do they sound pleasant. I can give you some examples of this, too. Could It Be Magic? I'm not sure what Barry Manilow did in the line of striking a deal with another band, but there was yet another band that grabbed a hold of this, and they did a cover of Could It Be Magic. I can't relate to their cover at all, because I've heard Could It Be Magic from Barry Manilow. That's what I used to listen to when I was a kid. Now, sometimes it's because of a cover, and I'll give you another perfect example of this. I already did a video about this, and it was from Nicolette Larson, okay? Somebody got a hold of Nicolette Larson's song, Lotta Love, stripped out the saxophone, stripped out the flute playing, and the violins, and the song was just bland after that. Who wants to listen to that? I certainly don't. But the list goes on and on. I already covered how Celine Dion took on Eric Carmen's All By Myself, but that's not the only time she did that. Yep, Celine Dion went ahead and took John Lennon's Happy Xmas and did a cover of that. And I'm telling you, it wasn't the same. It doesn't sound the same. If you compare the two, they really aren't, and I will have to make another video, and I will have to show you just how different they really are, and why I cannot relate to Celine Dion's version. Gloria Estefan, she did a pretty decent rendition of the song So Far Away, but what did she leave out? She left out the flute at the end, and it didn't sound the same, and that's why I couldn't stand it. Most of the song was fine, but when she got to the end and was playing that guitar, no, I wanted the flute. I wanted the flute back. It wasn't there. And that's what made the song bland. That's why I can't relate to it. But sometimes it's not really so much the song that's the problem. Sometimes it's the artist's lifestyle that gets to be the problem. Let me tell you something. I was not a big fan when Michael Jackson took his kid and hung him out of the window. I'm sure you guys all remember that incident. I'm not a huge fan of the lifestyle of Rick James. Although I do listen to his song Super Freak, I wasn't a big fan of his lifestyle. Okay? And I could go on and on and on, but I'm not going to. But that's the point. Sometimes you're not so much sick of the music that's being produced, you're just sick of the person who's producing it, because they have lived a lifestyle that is contrary to your values. So you find yourself in a tough position trying to relate to a song. Okay? So, let me ask you this. How do you relate to a song that has only 4 chords, and it's the same 4 chords that have been used in practically every other song that you've been listening to in the same year? It could be really tough for you to do that. How can you relate to a song that is mostly computer generated? How do you relate to a song that has lyrics that an 8-year-old could probably write during elementary school recess? It could be really tough. And I know you guys are saying, well, you bought Vacationers Good as New. Okay, yes, I did. It was a pretty pleasant song. But even in that review, I told you guys, I did not like that drum machine being way overused. It was way overused. I told you guys that. Now, if you want further information on this particular topic, I have a video right down here. I'm also going to provide a hyperlink to another video after the one I just told you about, and it's going to be an introduction to music appreciation. It was taught by a Yale University professor, and you can learn music appreciation from that. I want you guys to learn music appreciation. That way you understand and you can comprehend good music from bad music. I'm telling you, there is such a thing as bad music, and now you're seeing it. Let me tell you something. Disco Duck was a bad song. Why? It was annoying. It was like having somebody taking their fingernails and running it down a chalkboard. It was really, really annoying. So it was a bad song. And that's why. Now let me tell you something. I'm a generally happy person. Don't get me wrong. But there is a genuine happiness, and then there is this over-the-top happiness. And sometimes I get this picture in my head of people abusing drugs. And it's their state of happiness that I'm like, man, I don't want to ever be that happy. That's way too happy. And you can see this, and like I say, in my head, I get this picture of, I guess it would be called an artificial happiness. It's not genuine. There's no genuine happiness to this. Okay? In my head, I picture people doing drugs. Not necessarily does everybody do that, but that's the first thing that comes to my mind when I hear a particular song that I find is overly happy. It's artificially happy. Okay? And when I hear a song that I feel is really artificially happy, I just can't relate to it. And believe me, I hear songs like this all the time. And it's like, I've never been that happy, and I don't think I ever want to be. It's not genuine. There is a difference between genuine happiness and artificial happiness. So hopefully you'll comprehend what I'm saying here. And I'm sure you've heard probably dozens of songs yourself. You're like, I can't believe those people are that happy. That's just too unrealistic to be believed. But anyway. Well, I want to thank you very much for watching this particular presentation. If you have any questions for me, go ahead and leave them down here in the comments below. Before you ask me any questions, I want you to go to these hyperlinks. I want you to check out everything I've said and see this all for yourself. Alright. This is Ted the Speed Learner signing off. I will tell you more in a future video, so I'd like for you to stay tuned.